Hello, geeks. Welcome to another episode of Lunch Tech and Chat. And as usual, I've got my friend Will here. We're going to be talking a little bit about AI, maybe blockchain. Let's see where this conversation goes. I did want to talk today about, the whole vibe coding and tools for code development, agents. Maybe we'll touch a little bit on blockchain. Let's say how much time we have.
Yeah.
Will, how you doing?
Yeah, good man. Just growing the beard and actually kind of like becoming a bushman. That's actually my next
Caveman.
my latest drill. Yeah.
Caveman. Are
Mm.
you growing your beard to protect you from the cold, your chin? Is that what it is? Or are you
Yeah,
thinking of
yeah.
taking some of their hair and implanting on your head? What's the strategy there?
That could be actually a secondary strategy, but the first one was to cover myself a little bit like from the cold mornings that we've been having here. And also, like it's just a bit of a change. Every winter, I like to do a little bit of this just to get myself into a winter mode. And actually, at some point, I just get tired of it and actually I shave it off. So that's the way that I'm doing it.
It's awesome. I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of vibe coding and agent, and those two worlds are sort of blending more and more as well. So I think that could be a good subject for us to cover. I've been using in testing and using in production a lot of different tools. So I everybody knows about the OpenAI Codex, which we talked about a while back, and we didn't think that was quite there. But there are other tools like Cursor AI, which seem used to be like the top tool that everyone wanted to use. And then Claude Code came out. Claude Code is amazing. I use it daily. It's such a
Right. Okay. I haven't
spectacular.
actually used them much. I've been reading a lot about the different kind of like blogs and etc. that actually Anthropic puts out, but I haven't actually really got into. I think it's a habit thing, like once you start actually using some, then you kind of like you end up actually kind of like using that as a default. It's maybe kind of like a behavior kind of like thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a while that it's being on the side for me actually to try a little bit more about cloud. How's your experience been like in terms of?
Yeah, so let's talk about Claude Code, but there are a bunch of other tools. So there's the Google Code, I forgot was a code that you run on your terminal locally. Microsoft today just released the tool this morning,
Yeah.
and we are on the 24th of July. So there's a new tool from Microsoft, which it's like so Google has two tools. There's the Google Terminal one, and there's
Yeah.
if you go to the Google, what is that called? The Google Lab site or something like that. I
Yeah.
forgot what
Mm-hmm.
they called. You
Yeah.
can you can use the other tool that they've got online, and then you just generate the code. It hosts it for you. You test it, and then when you want to deploy, it just deploys to GCP, which is quite
So,
cool.
so is it still is it already quite live yet? The Google one was just is still kind of like part of the because they have the
Yes,
labs, and
there
I've
is
been
a
testing
Google one
some
that
of the.
is live,
Yeah.
that is quite strong one.
Yeah.
So let me just look it up here. So I'd say the right name, Google AI Dev. I'm just Googling it quickly. So on Google AI Studio. So if you go on Google AI Studio, that's
Mm.
free. Anyone can use. You go aistudio.google.com, and then on the side, there's a option called build. So if you go on build, you just type what you want, or you start from a template. It generates a system. You can test it. Once you
Yep.
test, it deploys for you in GCP, which is pretty cool. So it does the
Mm.
whole end-to-end cycle for you. There are other tools as well. I know we said that we're gonna focus on Claude Code, but just to touch the other ones because I know people will ask in the comments. There's uh there's the Google's AI Studio. There's the Google Terminal one. There was Q Code from AWS.
Mm.
There is now Kiro from AWS, which is amazing. And then Microsoft just released one this morning that I haven't played with it yet, so I don't know how good it is.
And
But yeah, taking the
windsurf
world.
is also part of that kind of like same vibe coding kind of like group.
Yeah, but windsurfing, I don't know if you know the story, but they sort of lost a lot of their market, and then they so the only way to save them was for someone to buy them because I think
Yeah,
they didn't have enough money to.
I've read some blogs about the story behind
Yeah,
it.
so I don't think they had enough money and expertise to get back into the market. Like they were quite strong, like Cursor AI, and then they lost a big share of the market. And then OpenAI was like, "Oh, we're gonna put I don't know how many billions dollars to buy," and then they gave up last minute. They said that the main reason for the giving up is because they would have to share with Microsoft. They didn't want to do that because of the contract, and then Google just ended up. Getting all the top guys from windsurf and bringing to Google Labs. So that's sort of a summary of the story.
Do you know the whole story though?
You can
I
go for
read
it.
some guys that actually kind of like did. So it was amazing. Look, the way that it all played out. So apparently Windsurf got that first offer from OpenAI and actually didn't accept. And then Google came on. It was actually there's a guy that I follow on LinkedIn. He's actually pretty good on like fintech and tech generally, and he kind of like goes a little bit deeper into each of those background stories. So OpenAI came on with an offer. The offer eventually got rejected. Google came in and actually offered a whole bunch of money just to, I think, to the two co-founders of Windsurf.
Yeah.
And then the two co-founders essentially kind of like cashed on and exited on their team. There was actually 200 people or 200 plus people that were under that team, all of the engineers and all that kind of stuff. And the co-founders essentially ditched them kind of because they exit. Okay, we've kind of like, we exited ourselves, we are good, all that kind of stuff. Then there was actually another company, I need actually to find exactly who went on and bought all the 200, 250 actually employees in broad. So essentially, the IP didn't go with the big offer of actually Google, went with the people that the other company actually bought. They brought all of the guys. They said like, yeah, the guys actually they
Love it.
actually implemented actually the product, went with the company that paid way less for all of them, got all the IP. So actually, essentially, Google just paid for the two co-founders that essentially didn't work at all on the product.
That's
It was
interesting.
amazing. It was an
That's very
amazing story
and
actually that happened there.
you know something else that I was thinking of, like this sort of terminal coding thing became like quite a big thing now. But before all these companies, they were like cloning V code, and that was the base of building the solution. So they all look very similar, if not the same. It's pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Um, so just talking about Claude. So Claude is great, is amazing. There are a few different licenses. I think one costs $40 and the other one 200 US dollars, something like that.
Yep.
The difference on the price is about how much of Opus tokens you can use, which is the latest model from Entropic. And it's pretty good how it runs. It's not just about the LLM. There's some logic, there's some secret source there that makes it run really well. So you open the tool, you can open it on your terminal, or if you've got Claude or Vcode or anything like that, you can just open like a little prompt dialog inside and just have it running like a terminal. Um, and when you start your code, so let's say you are starting from an existing piece of code. So let's say you've got already an application, you just want to put AI over it, right? So you can do slash init, like for initialization init. And when you press enter, what Claude does is it goes through all your code and creates a document called claude.md, and it
Mm-hmm.
documents your whole system. So
Yep.
that creates
Nice.
the baseline for AI to start working on your code. And I think that's pretty cool how it does that. Were you going to ask a question?
Eliminating essentially kind of like the need for, I guess, for analysts and technical writers actually to essentially to understand what is happening under the hood.
Yeah. But the thing is, once you start using Claude, let's say your code base is large or you're doing lots of things, right? The problem is um you run out of tokens for Opus, which is okay because the other models are quite okay to run as well. Um, but I think the biggest problem is the largest your Claude MD file goes, and the more code you've got sort of files and code in your code base, the harder it gets for the context window to handle everything. So you end up running out of context window, which is pretty bad because what it does is it runs a sequence, or I'll call it agent, but I don't know if it's the right word, but it compacts everything that is in the context window, and it starts using that summarized version to
Yeah,
move forward,
it's pretty
which
shit.
is not great, and it starts
Yeah.
creating a lot of mistakes. And you end up using a lot of tokens to do simple things because the model doesn't have the full context anymore.
Yeah, that's the
So
thing that kind of like
yeah,
that happened a lot with, I guess, early versions. I mean, a lot of the LLMs over time they increased that context window to allow for I guess for development, right? But like I remember in the very beginning, the very first like GPT 3 and 4, there were I actually like because I faced that problem actually quite quickly with even like with the OpenAI. And I remember that actually I looked up online some guys, I think they were related to LangChain, and they were essentially trying to implement a modern version of how HDFS files and processing our database actually work with doing kind of like batching of contexts, aggregating them together and doing summarization for actually for handling all of that context, essentially doing kind of like the part of like data engineering to aggregate data into context, which is I guess similar to what you were saying there, where the AI then goes on, oh, I don't have enough context window to treat this data, therefore it starts kind of summarizing different bits of content, but probably misses a lot by doing
yeah.
that
So
summarization, I suppose.
there's a good workaround on that. So telling the secret for all the developers hearing to this podcast. So the workaround is when you're using something like Claude, you can create agents that are specialized in different things inside Claude. And there are agents that you can then reuse on Cursor AI or other tools as well. But you can create agents, and your agents will be specialized in different, like subject matter experts in different things. So you have like an agent doing the requirements, and then you can just instruct the agent to create a folder with a bunch of MD files, each for each of the requirements or the pages or etc. And then you have another one, I don't know, for UX design, for architecture, and so on. So what I've been doing is I create a bunch of agents. The agents are specialized for different things. So every time I run a thing, my Claude MD file is actually quite small because it just gives enough context to call the right agent to do the right thing. So the agents are passing on information from one to the other. So let's say the first one did the requirements, and now the second one will pick up to do architecture design or UX design, whatever. When it gets to the developer only gets the context window of what actually needs to know to run. And then you have
Hmm.
another agent that is doing the whole full end-to-end testing in the end. So this is a really good and nice method of doing this. The problem is it's more effective, the quality is better, but it takes longer to run.
Yeah.
So the next stage that I'm getting now is how can I run those agents in parallel? So if I
Mm.
have multiple codes running in parallel, I can create um, sort of information that the agents will add somewhere for the next agent to pick it up and know what it needs to do. So let's say, for example, you have an agent that is doing the requirements, and you can say every time you write a new requirement is completed, mark the file as XYZ or put this thing here. And then you
Mm.
can say to the next agent that is doing, for example, architecture or UX design, keep looking at this document. If you see the keyword, you know that this is a new requirement that you need to pick it up. And then you can have multiple agents working parallel in different windows. And I think that's going to speed up a lot, but I haven't tried that yet.
So I guess like just to try to summarize that or paraphrase a little bit like what you're saying, you're trying to essentially do a sort of like parallelization plus asynchronicity in the relationships between the different agents. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, 100%. And then you can even have like multiple developers doing different parts of your source code, right? Like one working on the back end and the other one front end. Or if you are modularized, they doing different modules and they specialize on each of the models. Like you can configure your developers how you want them to be. So that's the nice thing of having agents, and then you can keep the context window smaller, which means that it will take a little bit longer for it to blow and it will make the agents more effective. So that's
Yeah.
the strategy that I've been sort of planning and training and testing lately.
But I suppose like here the thing that I'm thinking about is like is the orchestration on that asynchronicity. The design pattern of that orchestration is much more complex than a sequential kind of set of workflow, right? Like when you
100%. 100%.
and how can you I think once you go into more complex design patterns where the orchestration has a lot of, I guess, bidirectional flow between an agent preparing something, another one actually doing so like an agent preparing the requirement, another one actually going and implementing that requirement, another one actually testing it, and there is a synchronicity between just those three things, which are pretty like it's very simple. I'm not even talking about back end and front end, and you have flow back and forth plus time flow back and forth between all of that. How do you actually go and test and evaluate that the agents that are essentially developing are developing according to what you expect is the requirement of the development?
Yeah. So I
Seems to be a
think that's
pretty hard problem to solve the accuracy of what it does there, because it's much easier to follow the accuracy between a kind of, I guess, a sequential flow or not an asynchronous, but like a synchronous flow of development rather than one where there's a lot of that back and forth plus the time changes along the way.
I think there's a few different ways of doing this. The ways that I have been thinking about, and as I said, once I implement this and it's working well, I can share with everyone that listens to our
Yeah,
podcast. But the things that I've been thinking about is you can have one agent that is coordinating the other agents. That's one way
yeah,
of doing it. I'm not sure if that's going to be the most effective way of doing that. I think the most effective way is probably breaking requirements into packages, and each package, when it's completed, it signalizes for the next agent to pick it up and work on it. So let's say the requirement is written, you have the first package like you need to deliver XYZ, and then the next agent will pick that up and start working, and then it will go to the developer and go to the tester. And in parallel, a new requirement is being written already. So you have like flows of packages that are all running in parallel. Like you kick package one's here, you kick package two, you kick package three, and it's sort of going to a line, sort of like a manufacturing line. That's how I've been thinking about this, all running in parallel, and not
yeah.
the agents not being waiting. Like they always have work to do on a new package coming up. That's how I've been thinking, but I need to implement that to see if it's gonna work.
Are you familiar with like techniques like concumber or test driven development and like or behavior driven development?
Test driven development, yes.
Yeah.
Behavior driven development, no.
They have like some similarities between them, but essentially what you do here is actually you essentially as part of the requirements gathering, instead of like having that kind of like full elicitation of all of the requirements, you essentially just building code to pass certain failures. Essentially, the moment actually the code is built that actually it passes and there's no failure against something that you're saying, like I say I want to test that I can click a button and the button will activate X, Y, and Z window. That's all that you do. So the requirements are much, I guess, simpler in that sense because you're not building kind of like, oh, I have a wider vision of the product. I just have these little bits and pieces here. Um, it
But that's
feels
how
to
you do
me,
it in Agile, right? Like you do a use case and
yeah,
you have how you test that use case for failure or pass, right?
yeah, but like in the test-driven development, it's more like a DevOps kind of like um, mindset rather than an agile. You essentially kind of you essentially putting things out and then just making sure that if there is actually failures, then you test against just that failure, then just testing against that failure, just testing and failure. You're not trying to do anything else that is more widening
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of terms of product workflow than that. Seems like that kind of approach because it's really targeted might be fitting more for that type of development
Yeah.
rather than an agile where you have, because in agile you have a lot of like the grooming process and then you have like the sprint cycles. You have in test driven development as a DevOps pattern, you don't have that. You just say like, this is failing, I just testing for that, and then I'm moving forward.
Well,
This
it
is failing
works. It works for stuff that is broken, but it doesn't work for new stuff that you're
for
building,
new
right?
things, yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess if you do like a very minimum kind of prototype as you get started for new things, you just do a very minimalistic, and then once you do that very minimalistic like rapid prototype, you then iterate on those failures as a
But that's
development.
essentially how you do it with AI, right? Like you build
Yeah,
something, you go and test this button is not working. You say this button
yeah,
doesn't work, test it out, look at the logs and fix it, and then it goes back to the agents. Or even like, I don't like the color patterns. Can you fix that? I can't read this. Like it's all yeah. So I
yeah,
have been doing that, not knowing that there was a
yeah.
that had a name
There's
to the code.
there's a framework like yeah,
Yeah,
it's like some people
nice.
actually use sometimes interchangeably behavior driven developers, essentially kind of like how people interact with an application, and therefore just based on the failures of the application that becomes actually the requirement.
And
It's
one thing that I
essentially
was gonna say is AWS last week they released a tool called Cairo is Kiro, which is a development tool for AWS. I think it's in beta. I don't think it's GA yet. But essentially what it does is it works very similar to the frameworks that developers, even myself, have been creating for Gen AI code, which is sort of requirement driven. So you go put the requirement and then out of the box we'll have the agents doing the different things. So I think the companies, the sort of vibe coding, they changing the name now to context coding, I think, or something like that.
text
But
coding.
essentially what they're doing is just picking what the developers are doing and starting to embed into the tools out of the box, and those tools are becoming better and better. I haven't
Hmm.
used Cairo yet, to be honest. I know some people here in the team that have been testing it out and they say that is amazing. Seems to be better than Claude Code, but in my mind, Claude Code is the one that works the best now. So I've been using that one for production, and anything else that I'm playing with is just trying it out, demoing it out before saying that one tool is better than the other. I think Claude Code seems to be robust and sort of have enough usage to prove that it's a good tool, I guess.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of like maybe us to pivot while staying still like the context of I guess of development um into one of the things that I've heard the ex CEO of Alphabet, Eric Smith commenting about like recently, and he raised an interesting point, which was like with AI becoming over time better and better at creating both front ends and back ends of applications. He foresees a future. I don't know how far into the future you're talking about, but he foresees a future where essentially existing front ends and back ends will disappear. And essentially, like applications, the way that we interact right now with web applications and and websites and applications in general will essentially disappear, will be customized to such a level that people will only interact not in the way that we currently interact, which is like there has been a developer that has developed an application for considering a particular user journey and interaction with the software, where it's kind of like it's going to be more like person each person will interact with that person's version of that software, right? So it's like in a way that like everything will be based. His I guess the theory that he launched here is everything will be based on intent,
Mm.
and therefore kind of like the intent of the user or intent of the user of a particular software will be will be essentially what drives a particular user flow and user journey through an application, and not anymore a kind of like I guess a centralized approach in which a company develops the full application or based on assumptions of how users interact with that software. Found it quite interesting, a very futuristic way of looking at how people do things because I haven't seen anything like that. Like you see these tools that we talked about previously, like even Versal's code, where you can kind of essentially kind of like get applications up and essentially in a matter of minutes running, but going all the way to all that a company builds is a set of connections and stack to different APIs. And actually, it's the intent of the user that defines the user journey. Feels to me like so um, futuristic and so, I guess at the same time, so interesting because it's essentially a scaled up. The way that I look at it is almost a scaled up notion of social media today, where algorithm shows you things for you that is not the same things actually they shows for me. And each of us creates a view of the world on our interaction with social media that is based on what the algorithm is feeding me and what the algorithm is feeding you, and what you're having as content as input into your brain is different than the input that I'm having because of interests and stuff like this, except that actually applied to software applications.
Yeah.
Like
I
it's
mean,
like
I,
what
I
do you
can
what do you think about that kind of stuff based on things that you've been saying?
I can I can see the why he's thinking that way, and it does make sense, but I can't see that in the near future. Like corporates are too large. The main thing is as standardization. They've been doing things for a long time the same way. I think, yeah, even if we get there, I think it's gonna take a long time. Like I can't see as a transformation so fast on that because I think there's too many things involved, like legislations and processes and different people for different things. I think one step at a time. I think the first step is people need to use agents for agents to make people better, faster, more productive, and then agents replacing some people, and then agents doing end-to-end work, agents managing their own work until we get into a stage that we can think of humans interacting with technology different. I don't know, like I do see the point. Like if if I like to do something different and AI can generate it for me, why wouldn't I do that? But if you look today at a corporate, people are so busy, they just want to use something. Like they don't want to spend time on, oh, I like to interact this way. Can you, like people just want to use it. Like they just want to tell me what I need to do. I'll just go and do it. So I don't know. It's a big mindset. Like you said, it sounds very futuristic to me. I can see the why, and I can see it makes sense. It does make sense. Like why wouldn't I interact with something the way that I would like to interact? I see the customization possibilities here, but I think we're far out of that. I can't see that in the near future. Like, at least I might
Yeah,
be wrong, at least in
yeah.
my brain.
Maybe I guess I'm biased a little bit like to the I guess to the industry where I work, like in finance. And I still find to this day, so just like an anecdotal story, like just recently, I've gone through the process of kind of like, onboarding myself with a new kind of like a new neobank, essentially. And I still find that the process is so broken. Like, I mean, I've interacted in terms of like onboarding with like uh, traditional banks and like the non-innovative ones, and that's it's already assumed that that process is going to be painful. I don't think anybody kind of assumes that process is going to be easy for those ones. But when I still like today is to kind of like interacting with companies that actually are relatively new, that are building with all of these new software and new tools, and I see the pain that is still like, onboarding into a new bank where you're putting your funds on should take seconds, not days. I find it just mind blowing. So that's kind of like in that context, in certain industries, maybe that's a little bit more applicable, like particularly like in finance. I said like that kind of stuff was like, what is the intent here of my thing? Oh, the intent is having a user account, being onboarded on a user account. The account actually requires a certain, level of information, say kind of like proof of identity, proof of X, Y, Z, and that's the intent. And if you could just be on based on the intent, talking to the agent and getting the agent processing that instead of, you know, a fintech kind of like putting bots and humans doing, contact center support and taking hours to respond to your stuff is just so inefficient. Like, and this is a fintech. That's a new company that's supposed to move fast and break things relative to their competitors, and it's just shit. So it's
I
like,
think, uh, I
so I'm,
think,
I'm
uh,
just thinking in that context, like I was maybe translating a little bit like the intent in that context. It's like
yeah,
the intent is like getting something, so I actually can deposit funds and I can actually manage my money in kind of like in no time. This should be a no-brainer in 2025 kind of thing.
yeah. But there's lots of things there. Like if you think about, like, for example, anti-money laundry
Yeah,
rules or
yeah, yeah,
KYC, this and that. Like, I think there's things that need to happen before you can automate the process. So I'll just think of my mind. Like if I had to solutionize, so you need to have like a place, for example, that verifies your identity. Like we have in New Zealand, we've got in Australia, so you know what I mean. Like you go to a place, you verify that you are you, and there's a digital way of asserting that you are your person, right? And then with that, that needs to be linked to all the banks and everyone that needs to consume that information. And then the agent would have to have access to that. So in a way that you pass a token or something, it verifies that is you, and it verifies where your money is coming from. So that there needs to be a linkage between the banks of the money flowing through the different transactions. If it is in the blockchain, even easier because you can sort of track where the money came from and all the places that it's been to. So I feel like we've have the technology to do stuff like that, but we're not there yet to put the technology together in a way to do that. Some things need to happen as the baseline so the technology can start to integrate to each other. So it's more like, is that the government that drives? Is that private that drives? If it's private, how do you make sure that everyone uses? So I think there's a wider question that is not technological. And then once we go into agents and having AI doing the full automation, even though I love AI and I think AI is going to change the world, I don't fully trust 100% on AI. You can still inject prompts, you can still trick AI. So who guarantees that someone is not going to be tricking AI to do malicious stuff, stealing someone's money or force using someone's identity? I think there's a piece of creating the base stack that someone needs to drive from, I don't know, a global, a local, a government, or a one business, one country vision, that baseline allows things to be built on top. I know this is the vision of blockchain and all that stuff, but I don't think like corporate is there yet. They coming sometimes. Some things are taking more adoption than others. So even though I feel like we are in this world, we can see this stuff. It's very slow for most people. Like think of your parents, my parents. My father would never go and talk to a bot and do everything online without talking with a human. And I know people that don't even use like phone apps because they don't trust it. Like it's there's too many things involved. I'm not saying that is impossible, but I think it's a journey to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely a journey, right? But I was just like thinking about the different steps that we're just like talking about for them, like AML, KYC, KYB, um, CFTC requirement, like counterterrorism financing, etc. Those all those things, they're, I guess, legitimate checks in the system, and there's like friction on them, maybe sometimes for a reason. But a lot of them right now, they're already done by the same humans that don't have the attention span, and they also like have the attention span of an amoeba, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's the same guys in the on the other side, right? So that's why I'm saying like it's more like the on the user side, kind of if everybody has an attention span of an amoeba, then maybe actually the agent might do a better job and
You know,
faster, right?
the thing that I'm finding more and more with AI is humans can make mistake and that's fine. If
Hmm.
AI makes mistake, that's the end of the world.
Yeah,
People
that's true.
expect AI to be perfect. If
Yeah.
AI is 500% better than a human, let's say human 60%, AI is 98%, if 2% of the time is getting wrong, people will rant on AI and find all the reasons why not to use it.
Mm.
So there's
Yeah.
still sort of a lack of trust or understanding for people to trust more or even understand like this thing might not be solving the world but is making us a lot better. So just take the next step. Like it's better to be closer to 100. You know that whole
Then
concept of
having
like
the
the glass
having
half
the
full or the glass half
yeah
empty, right? Like it's the same
then
thing.
having the human that is barely 50%, right? It's like humans are barely 50% right most of the time. I've heard heard people of older age. There's actually a very good guy that he's been interviewing, that I've been following, him interviewing people that are older, that are like that are 70s, 80s, even 100 years old, and actually he interviews them a lot. It's a very interesting channel. It's called like Sprout, and he interviews these people and asks all of these honest questions, like, yeah, you're here. What is it that you regret, that you don't regret? What is it that you would tell your 25-year-old kind of self, if you had your mind of today? All that kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
And you realize through hearing some of those interviews, how much many of them actually say, well, if there's one thing that I would do, I would take more risks. I would ignore what other people say. I would actually make way more mistakes than I did. Because a lot of those people actually, they realize that kind of stuff by the age of 60 or something. They're just like, fuck, I didn't take enough risks, right? And it's kind of like it's a bug in a future of humans, I guess, taking
Yeah.
risks, because it's it's a feature in the sense that it's like it's is the idea of raising up an hypothesis which says, what if, that makes us make leaps in doing something different and new,
Yeah.
which
It, that's a
in
really
any
interesting.
other, even within AI, we see that as a bug, the what if, right? It's like, because the what if has no right answer to it, right? It's not, it's non-existing yet. So
That's a really
someone,
good conversation because the what if is positive and negative. Like,
mm,
what if I had done that, or what if I tried that? And then you have the what if it doesn't go right? What if I destroy my family? What if I don't pay
mm,
my bills? So it plays on positive and negative, right? Like it's
mm,
the whole thing of that's why that's why a lot of people do not take risks because they have the risk of risking what they already have, right? Like
exactly.
it's a really interesting conversation. Like how do
And
you
as they
back
grow
yourself?
older, they have accumulated more certainties than uncertainties, and therefore they are even more afraid of the uncertainty side, right? It's like um, there's this good philosopher and educated. Actually, I've read quite a few books of called Edward de Bono, and one of the things actually he says is like when you are in that first phase of your life, like to 0 to 6, 7 years old is the age of the why. And when you get to that age between 7 and I think 7 in like adolescence, kind of like days, he says like this is the ways of why not. And once you pass that age and you get like into early adulthood and later, it says like it's the age of because. And in those three stages of life, and I'm like, and one of the things that he says is like people should much more often go from because they kind of like to know the truth to more like why not and why. Kind of go back to their early years of their lives to go forward. Because if they just say because, that means that they are no longer learning, right? Whereas actually kind of in the very first kind of 18 years of their life, they are learning
I
way
love
more.
thinking about that. Like I know long conversations with my dad. My dad was always say, I've already learned everything that I needed to learn, and that's the thing, right? Like it's the because and then not the why not. So with this question, I'll leave this question for everyone that has listened to this podcast. Are you a because or are you a why not person? Leave it in the
Mm.
comments and why. Will, thank you very much. You know I need to go, so thank you very much for your time today. Thanks for everybody that have been listening to us. Leave it in the comments the things that you would like us to be talking about. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, see you next time.
Yeah, and just a reminder to every to anybody that has been listening to our conversations, if you would like to actually to reach out to us, so feel free either to leave comments comments on the comment section, or send us an email. We might take a little bit sometimes actually some time because we were both busy outside of our podcast shows, but we look at any comments that actually people send or any emails that actually people send to us. And if you would like to even to we're starting actually to have some people kind of like reaching out to us about participating in our discussions, participating in the show with us, with like people that have, I guess, interesting stories. We are always looking for people that have like interesting backgrounds and stories that we can have like a deep unfiltered conversation with. That's how we like to interact with people. um, Feel free to reach out to us, and we'll we will read everybody's emails and messages and actually try to get back to you as soon as possible.
You will find our email address in a Spotify podcast called Lunch Tech and Chat, or in a YouTube channel called Lunch Tech and Chat. You can find our email address there. And as Will said, please get in touch. And we might take a while to reply, but we'll always do. Thanks very much. Thanks, Will. And I'll see you all next time.
Thank you.